All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us again today on the Food Junkies Food Addiction Summit. Today we have Siobhan Harris of the Unsweetened SIO podcast. Siobhan, would you just introduce yourself for any of our audience that may not know who you are?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really happy to be talking today. So I have a podcast called Unsweetened SIO. It tells about my own story of sugar addiction. And I tell my own personal story, but also interview a lot of people like Molly and Clarissa, which has been amazing. I also coach clients in a group setting to help overcome sugar addiction. And then I'm also certified in the emotion code and the body code, which are ways of kind of dealing with trapped emotions that we all have. And I found very useful in my own recovery. So I decided to get certified.
So we are highlighting you today as part of our this summit as part of our personal stories. Can you kind of share what brought you to recovery, what it was like before, and, maybe what the turning point was in your journey and where you're at now?
Yeah. So I would say life before was a roller coaster. That's like the word that immediately came to my head. Just up and down. I mean, I was caught in a constant binge diet cycle, and pretty early on too. I've done the sugar assessment tool that Bitten created, and I test off the charts, not to brag, but I am pretty addicted when it comes to, the scale. So, it started really early on for me too, as I've shared, before, that I remember from an early age, like sneaking cookies before anyone else woke up in the morning, and kind of knowing even then that I had to hide it, so I dealt with it from a really, really early age. And, even though I had it very available, it wasn't like I was, I just was addicted from the start, and struggled with that through my teenage years and so on. And it was really when I started, once I hit puberty, I started gaining weight. And that's when the first time I started thinking about diet and how I looked. And, at the time it was all low fat diet. So I'd really kind of restrict what I was eating. I was very athletic and involved in a lot of sports. So I think that helped as far as maintaining my weight. But definitely around, I would say 15, 16 years old, that whole diet binge cycle was born. So I would have periods of, doing really well, and then periods of falling off, because I always would fall off the wagon. And it was exhausting. It's a roller coaster. For anyone that's on it, it is freaking exhausting. It takes up so much of your time. There's so much guilt and shame and self-hatred. And I had found myself to be pretty accomplished, and, as a good student, I was a good athlete, all these other things, but I could not put it to, bring it under control, this one thing. And I was really embarrassed about it. It was kind of like my secret. And I kind of feel other people out, like friends that, wondering, but no one else really kind of understood this. Right. And I remember one friend saying, we saw someone that was kind of overweight, and I was feeling, empathy for them. And she's like, they just need to stop eating. I don't understand. It's not hard. And even then that's when I started kind of thinking, but it's much harder than that, for some people. It's not as simple as just stop eating. There's so many other things going on. And so I think tried every single diet, every single exercise program, looking for the solution. Like every new book that came out, I was like, yes, this is the one. It's gonna fix me. I have read so many books and tried so many things, so many weird things. I mean, you name it, I've tried it, right? Even hypnosis, everything possible, alternative stuff, regular stuff. But I would just go back to that same thing. And I was, I'd lose weight, and then I'd gain the weight back, and then some, so slowly my weight's creeping up. And, as I got into this continued into my 20s and my 30s, I was diagnosed with polycystic ovary syndrome. And that's when I finally started trying to pay more attention to what I was eating and the quality of what I was eating. And I knew that sugar wasn't good for me, but I could not stay off of it for any amount of time. I would try, I would do like the Whole30. I did the South Beach diet. I did Atkins, stuff that was really, low or no sugar. And I just couldn't. I did the Sugar Busters diet, I remember, and I just couldn't stick with it. Like I would always be triggered and then eat and be right back where I started and just feel lower and lower and lower, just so bad about myself. And I was finally able to have kids. That was a whole journey and process too, with the polycystic ovary syndrome. And after having kids, a lot of these habits came back. And then I started thinking about, well, I really don't want the kids to seem like I don't want to model this behavior to them, and a lot of times, I would, they were really little, so they'd be in bed and I would eat or whatever, but I just thought I want to be healthier for them. And so kind of in desperation, actually, I got my health certificate through the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, to be a certified integrative nutrition health coach. Really, the motivation there was trying to find the missing piece for me, because I knew we studied all these diet theories, had all these amazing expert speakers, lecturers, learned so much. I learned so much, but still didn't find that fit for me. So I think my real low points, that's kind of what I'm getting to here is, I go, to be I get my certificate as a health coach. I start seeing clients and see right away that they're having an easier time going off sugar than I ever did. I'm like, what the heck's going on here? I'd heard about, sugar addiction, not that my, unfortunately, the certificate program didn't really cover sugar addiction, right? Covered emotional eating, eating disorders, binge eating disorder, all this other stuff, but it didn't really cover sugar addiction. But I had read about it and then would read something else opposing it saying, oh, that's not really true. And of course, as an addict, I didn't want to give it up. So any article that was going to say this, you don't have to give it up, I was like, okay, let's go with that. So again, here I am. I finally have my coaching certificate and I got invited to a conference that they do in New York City. And I got to see all these amazing people in person and an auditorium filled with all these health coaches. It was amazing energy. I was like, oh, finally, my people. But I was in a really bad binge cycle. And I remember we all went to Whole Foods for lunch. And it was like, just took over this New York City Whole Foods, all these health coaches eating really healthy things. And I was like, I can't get through, because we still had a couple hours left before the evening. I'm like, I can't get through this without a fix. I need to get something. And so I remember kind of being really ashamed too. I got like a cannoli or something because it was hard to find something at Whole Foods. I didn't want I wanted something like really, sugary. So I found this cannoli, which isn't even something I really like. But I remember kind of people looking at me like, what, but I just made it's like, oh, I have my period, just really, it's a treat I have every, making these excuses that wasn't true. It was just so I could get through. And then once that conference that night was over, my husband had come with me and we would go to shows and stuff at night. But I would literally stop at a convenience store and get like M&Ms or something and just start pounding candy because I just needed that fix, that hit. And that was just like a really, really low point for me. I thought, oh my gosh, I still haven't helped myself. I got this, went through this program and I still haven't gotten to the bottom. Like, what is wrong with me? Something is really wrong with me. And so I had finally read an article then that kind of put it all together. Again, very familiar with the concept of addiction, but it was someone that was a recovering alcoholic drug addict and talked about how coming off sugar was harder for him than it was giving up heroin. And that really, if you are an addict, you have to be abstinent. That's the only way to recovery, and that for sugar, you also had to give up flour. So for me, that was the missing piece. I'd given up sugar, but and gone gluten-free, but I think I was still sometimes substituting maybe with honey or agave nectar or, some kind of, rice flour or whatever. It was enough that it was still triggering me, So again, being very addictive on that scale, I needed it completely out of my system. So that was really rock bottom. for me was, experiencing that where I just felt really embarrassed of myself, and just knowing again, so I was just like, I will try that. I got to the point, and then reading that article, that just kind of was that final puzzle piece for me. Again, nothing that I hadn't really heard before, but just the way he wrote it. And I thought, well, what do I have to lose here? I am so desperate. I'm going to give this a try. So that was kind of where I, finally got to, I am just pure desperation is what led me to give it up. And I knew too, the big part of that too, was I knew deep down inside that I couldn't just give it 30 days, because I tried 30-day things. I thought, this is something I've been dealing with at the time. I was, late 30s. I've been dealing with my whole life, basically, because I remember again from an early age that this started, and I knew that it wasn't going to happen overnight. So I committed to a full year, and I just told myself, if you have seen no results after a year, you can just eat your face off for the rest of your life. At least you tried, and I was like, then I can just accept that this is, it's just, I just need sugar or whatever. That's just how it's going to be. And I was just going to make, live with it, but at least let's give it this one final ditch effort. And that's really what it felt like.
So I'm curious, how was this different than those times that you had tried those other sugar-free, like the Whole30, those ones that you had kind of mentioned, how was that actually different? You said, okay, I couldn't stay out of the food. I tried it, but I still couldn't stay out of it. And then you read this article, and now the rest is history. Here you are 3-4 years into your like abstinence from those things. What made it different?
I think it was mindset, so it was the flour piece was huge. And I'm sure, I think on the Whole30, you don't have flour, but maybe some gluten-free flour. I don't know. I must have something that was triggering me enough, right, to make me want more. But also it's the mindset of 30 days versus a full year. It's just like when you're gearing up to take a road trip. It's one thing if you're just traveling like an hour, but if you're going on like a 10-hour journey, you got to like gear up and get in the right mindset for that. It's way different. So that's what it felt like for me was I'm doing this for a full year, and it's gonna suck for a while, and just accepting that. Because I had done the 30 days. I know it sucked, and I just was like, but it has to get better. If I keep going, it has to get better. So I think it was just that mindset of knowing it wasn't going to be smooth and it was going to take a while. And that I wasn't one of those people that in 30 days felt amazing. Like, I was a part of a CrossFit gym when I did the Whole30, and so many people after 10 days are like, I have so much energy. I feel amazing. And I was like, I hate you, because I am like dying inside. And so I just, again, knew that for me, the journey was going to look a little bit different. And it was really changing that in my head of just do it for a full year, and just keep going.
And is that kind of the mantra that kept you going through that initial year? Like,
yes.
Is that how you, like, when it got tough, it was just keep going?
Yeah. And it was also my other mantra, because I do think they're really important, is like and it was like, I was reading like a parenting book about how to talk to kids. And it was something like, in our house, we don't do that. We just don't do that. And it was, so I kind of adapted that to myself. It was, I don't do that anymore. I just don't. So that was my mantra when it came to like, oh, I could really use a sugary snack right now. Nope, I don't do that anymore. I just don't, and just would shut it down. Because yeah, those thoughts come up, keep popping up. And still, rarely now, but every once in a while, I'll have a thought come up and it's like, nope, I don't do that. I just don't. So that was really kind of the mantra that got me through. But also the other thing was, at the time, I think now there's so many more resources out there. Like, this is amazing. Oh God, I wish I had something like this summit when I was first giving it up, because I felt so alone. I felt like I was the only person struggling with this. I felt like, I was the most addicted person in the world, and no one would understand how I felt. And so I just felt really, really alone. So I was looking for a book that, like, there's lots of great books out there, but something I wanted to hear about someone's like day-to-day journey and what it felt like. And so since I couldn't find that, I decided I'd write one. So every single day, that was another thing that really kept me going, was I'd write in this just Word document on my computer, like literally day one, and exactly what I ate, what I was feeling, good, the bad, the ugly. Some days it's really hard reading back on that journal now. I've done some recap episodes on my podcast, and it's really like makes me emotional reading back of how low I really was. And so that really kept me going, thinking I had this audience of people that I didn't want to let down all these people, since I didn't have a community, I kind of this imaginary community, but that really kept me going. But on those hard days, I'd be like, what, someone else might be reading this or listening to this one day and having a really hard day. So what am I going to do? So I wanted to be, kind of provide motivation for other people too. Again, if I could do it, other people would know that they could do it too.
Yeah. So I'm kind of wondering, like, what is food addiction recovery life like now? And maybe you could speak to a bit of what it was like at the beginning, mostly because you're a parent and life still happens. And recovery can't be your only priority. So how did you manage like maneuvering through those early stages of recovery to get to what life is like now?
Yeah. I mean, now it's amazing. Freedom is just amazing. Like people will say, nothing tastes as good as freedom feels. I believe that 110%. I mean, I am so grateful every single day for my freedom and being out of this vicious cycle. Like I can't stress that enough, just how great, and it still feels like a miracle to me. It feels like a freaking miracle that me of all people was able to get off of that. I never thought I would, honestly. I really, really never thought I would. So it feels like a miracle, and I don't take that for granted at all. It's like when I do my gratitude list every night, that's almost number one is my sobriety. But in the beginning, it was really, really hard. Like you said, I had very young kids at the time, like 2 and 3 or something. And I worked and, worked full time and, just all the things of life. But again, I think it was just knowing again that I was going to give this a full year, and that hope of it's going to get better, it's going to get easier, which it did. For me, I always say it took a good 5 months though. Some people it might be quicker, some people it might be longer, but for me, it was really 5 months before I started to feel some really big shifts. So I think, how did I get through those, 5 months? But it did get easier and easier as I had more time behind me. I think, wow, I went this far. I don't want to have to start over at day one again. And, we're just doing this for a year, so I really, I think what's really important is kind of upping your self-care too, and starting to deal, with the emotions that are coming up. That's the other hard part is suddenly, for me, I was an emotional eater too. I just shoved everything down, happy, sad, mad, glad. It just went down with food. And so when I wasn't stuffing that down, all these emotions are bubbling to the surface. And I was like, oh, feelings, what do I do with these? I mean, it was overwhelming at times. And that's where I was really lucky to find the emotion code, and why I got certified in it is it's a way to really release a lot of these emotions that come up in a way that was really freeing for me, understanding how to identify emotions and then release them. It was just amazing, and stop being afraid of feeling things, So I had to get really comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that was something that I did not like to be uncomfortable. That's why I turned to food all the time. Right. So it was really like, this isn't going to kill me, and it does, it's like, it does go away then. Like you have these intense feelings or thoughts or whatever. And if you can just sit with them, listen to them, feel them, they do go away. So that it just took a lot of work though. And just some kind of, I think for everybody, that journey looks different. So it's a lot of experimentation of what really works for you. I started really meditating and getting quiet every day. That's really hard for some people, but that has really, really helped me. And still, that's something that I do every day. And I can tell the days that I don't have time for it, I really pay for that later. So I think it was just learning too with kids and work and family and life, and really prioritizing myself too. I think women especially were so bad at that. We're taking care of everyone else and not taking care of ourselves. And I was like, that's bullshit, I'm sorry. But that's kind of what I was thinking. I mean, it's like, why do we do that? And I would never say that if I was talking to like a friend of mine. I'd be like, yeah, your health comes first. Take care of yourself. Like, why am I not being my own friend to myself? And just realizing too, the healthier I am, the happier I am, the better off everyone else is in my life too. And that has been, very true through this. I see that a lot now. So, really, understanding and valuing myself too and my health, and just really putting that as a priority, I think is, really, really important. And what again kept me going and focused in that beginning, I just really made that commitment. Like, this is going to be about me for a little bit. And it was, especially again, those first few months.
So we've heard a little bit about meditation being a part of your daily routine. Can you kind of take us through the day in the life of Siobhan as it pertains to recovery activities? Like, what does that kind of look like?
Yeah, I would say number one is extreme self-care. Like, that's how I put it. It's not just like, because I was like, what's self-care? I mean, that could be so many things. This is like extreme self-care. What does Siobhan have to do to get out of bed in the morning and not, tear into donuts or something? Is like, I try to wake up about half an hour before everyone else does. And I like to I do the daily calm is a meditation that I really like. It always has a really good message. And a lot of times, it's those things. And it's like exactly what I needed to hear. And then I have another meditation that I do, and different, I kind of trade. I do at least 2 meditations a day, different ones that I trade through, but the daily calm, I always start with. And then I really got into tapping too, which I don't know if you have other people talk about tapping, but it's the, emotionally, they call it EFT or emotional freeing technique. And it's basically tapping on different points on your face and body. And it helps release, another way to kind of release emotions and stuff coming up. So I use the tapping solution as Nick Ortner's app. Again, I love these. It makes it so much easier. Tapping, you don't need an app, but I really like the guided stuff. I find really helps me. Same with meditation. I like at least one guided. And he has all these different things. You can have tapping for anxiety, for patience, and so whatever I kind of check in with myself every morning, whatever's kind of coming up is then kind of what I tap on. So yeah, to get out of bed in the morning, I'm doing 2 meditations and a tapping, just starting right there. And I just feel so much more peaceful. And then I usually get a shower, and I like using essential oils, and one of the blends that I really like is Joy. And so I always rub that on my heart and I smell it, and I just shut my eyes, and probably for 5 minutes, I'm just doing different affirmations, for the day. And I try to set an intention for the day. Like recently, it's like, I'm going to be calm and patient with the kids, or whatever it is in the moment. It's really setting intentions and going through I have a list of affirmations, and I have them in my phone. I write them down as a reminder in my phone, and then I just read them, to myself. And so that's how I kind of start the day, because then, I have a 6 and 7-year-old. It's complete chaos until, we get off to school. It's, breakfast and lunches and carpool and da, 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 da. And so I find if I don't take that time and carve that time out for myself, because sometimes I'm like, I'm tired, I'm going to sleep in. I really pay for it later because I'm not patient. I'm not in the best place that I want to be. And I struggle more, throughout the day. So I think that morning routine is really, really critical to my overall recovery, but also an evening routine too. I think sleep for me is so important, as it is for most people. And when that gets away from me, that's another kind of trigger. It can be I'm hungry, and then you're kind of craving that quick fix, or I tend to eat more or make not as good choices. So I really think, I talk about this a lot on the podcast. I think it's so important in the group coaching too, about establishing like a sleep routine, because for babies, we do that a lot. For kids, it's like they really talk about every night you should do the same thing, bath and da, da, da. And I think adults could really benefit from that too. So for me, that means like 9 o'clock, I'm off, I try to be off electronics, not watching TV, not on my phone, and really spending that, like, cause I like to go to bed by 10. That's just my sleep window is like 10 to 6. I think that's the other thing. I think like kids, all adults have a sleep window, and it's so much easier to fall asleep for me and stay asleep if I hit that sleep window. And, that doesn't happen all the time. Life is not perfect. But when I can, I find that I sleep a lot better, and through the night typically. So I like to, I get off the screens, and then I like to read. That's just a way to kind of, and sometimes I journal. I always go to sleep. As I go to sleep, I always say some prayers and just list as many things as I can until I fall asleep of what I'm grateful for. Like, I think that to me is like the best way to fall asleep, is just in that really grateful place. So I usually, I don't even remember, I fall asleep and I'm like, oh, how far did I get? So I think it's really important how you end your day and how you start your day. That's something that we all have control over. And so, sometimes it's hard to get up early or hard to go to bed earlier, but I really think that makes a really huge difference in how I'm able then to show up. But on top of that, like during the day, it's also eating really good meals. Like, I know the food that works for me, and not comparing myself to what other people are eating, that sometimes still tempts me and distracts me. Like, ooh, what are they doing? And it's like, nope, focus, what works for you. And like continuing to eat meals, like just tightening up my food every day, making sure, I'm eating what I know is good for me and works for me. And then for me, exercise is a huge piece. I like to get outside. I don't work out like, I used to be really hardcore, I would say, but I'm more like, okay, let's be more mindful of my knees and joints. So even just walking, I try to walk every single day, rain or shine. I'll walk with an umbrella. And just get that outdoor fresh air. That helps me so much. And just that movement. And then just other like kind of little workout videos inspired by Clarissa actually recently, doing some more like high intensity interval training, because I just like, my body responds really well to that stuff. So finding those, a lot of people go to sugar or other addictive substances because it gives them that hit of feel good hormones, and emotions. And so trying to find other things that kind of light me up, so every single day, finding those other things that bring me joy. And again, it's not perfect every day, but when I am kind of starting to maybe unravel a little bit, immediately I'm like, let's look at your self-care, let's tighten this up. Let's do more. Cause I think has to be like extreme. I love to take baths. I love to read books. I love massages, so anything that I can do, I try to look at a week and make sure that I have some time built in, just for me. So that's what I would say on a day to day, kind of looks like, in the ideal world, doesn't always happen, as we know, and then being okay with that, I think I had a really good conversation with Bitten Johnson on the podcast about, progress, not perfection. And I think for me, was always one of those all or nothing people. So if one thing, like, I was maybe on day 28 of the whole, 30, and only had 2 more days, but if I messed up even once, I'd be like, well, that's done. I screwed up, that's all over. But I'm really much better about that now. It's like, okay, that happened. Let's just adjust. Or I'm too tired. Listening to your mind, I listen to my body so much more now too. You know what? I'm too tired. I'm not going to work out today. I need a rest day, and that's okay. Or like I was sharing before we started recording, I got stung by a hornet 3 times the other day, 2 days ago now, and I hadn't worked out yet, but I was like, I'm not working out tonight. Like, I'm sore, I'm swollen, I'm itchy. Yeah, it's okay. I can miss it tonight. So having some flexibility, I guess, too. But really, I think what I suggest to clients is just having because everyone's self-care looks different too. Make a list of things that really, really work for you. And I kind of have that on hand. Again, it's just a note in my phone. So it's like, oh, maybe I should do this. But being consistent about it on a day-to-day basis. Yeah.
No, it sounds like you have a ton of tools in your recovery toolkit and self-care. And you also have that so important self-compassion piece when life gets busy, I'll do what I can, and I'll give it my best, and that's enough.
Yeah.
So you also work with clients. So what is, like, you've shared some of your secrets. What's kind of that magical ingredient you see in their recovery plan where you're like, oh, wow, I'm so glad they're doing this. This is going to be a game changer for them.
Yeah. I really think the secret is that, like, once we can stop comparing ourselves to others and just realizing your own journey can look so different and is going to look so different from everyone else's journey, like, and stop comparing yourself to other people or trying to do it the way that they did it. I think that's where I see huge improvement, because I was so focused on that in the beginning too. I just wanted to lose weight because I was very overweight. I just wanted to lose weight. And reading back on the journal that I kept, I'm constantly struggling with that in the first few months. Well, this person gave up corn. Should I give up corn too? This person gave up nuts. Should I give up nuts? I mean, just like torturing myself. And again, it was that intuition of like, dude, you gave up sugar and flour. That's hard enough. Just do that. Don't try to diet on top of that. Don't worry about that. So that's something that I really, as far as food rules, is really like, the only rules in, when I do my group coaching is we're just giving up sugar and flour. Everything else, everyone else's journey and, eating plan is going to look different because it's going to be tailored to them. And that takes experimentation of what works for you and what doesn't work for you, because there are some people that can tolerate dairy, some people that can't. So instead of trying to make someone else's plan work for you, and that's the problem with, these diet books that are out there. It's like someone has really great success eating this exact way, and so I would try to follow those, where it's like, okay, breakfast, you have to eat exactly this, lunch, exactly this. And yeah, it didn't work for me, but of course it's not. We're all individuals, we're all bio individuals. And I think that our recovery is going to look different. There's a lot of tools that can help all of us, but really to make it sustainable, I think you really have to make it your own. Otherwise, you're just trying to live someone else's plan, basically. So for me, once I could really let go and just experiment and see what worked for me, it's been the easiest thing that I've ever done, because it doesn't feel like a diet. It's just the way that I eat now that's best for my body, and it doesn't feel like I'm white knuckling or anything, because I'm doing what works for me. And once in a while, I still experiment here and there. And I'm also aware that, what works for me today might not work for me tomorrow. So just being open to that as this kind of evolving process, because it's a lifelong journey. This isn't like something that goes away. Like, I am very aware that if I even had like, my son's birthday is this weekend, if I had like a piece of cake, oh, it'd be all over. Like, I am very, very aware of that. So yeah, that's just something. Yeah.
I think it's really important for people to hear that response to that question, that it's ever evolving. There's no one right way. We have to know our truth and live in our own truth and do what works for us. So thinking about that, I mean, what do you consider to date to be your greatest success? Thinking back this journey, like from the beginning, it's not like this just started 4 years ago. This started a lifetime ago. It can feel like sometimes, right? Like I often say, I feel like I'm 10 different people since the beginning, right? So what would you consider your greatest success since kind of getting this momentum going? I mean, like, obviously you never gave up. So there's that piece of it. I mean, talk to us a little bit about, could you have imagined that this is how your life would be today, 6 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago?
Yeah, no way. I think that is the greatest success, is that I actually did it and stuck to it and found freedom. Because, I searched for that for so long, and then always said, if I help myself, I want to help other people. And I'm so proud that that's what I'm doing now too. Like by doing the podcast and the group coaching, like that just gives me so much joy and fulfillment, just be able to really help other people navigate this and find that freedom, because it just feels so good. And yeah, there is no way, if you had told me that, I probably would have just bawled, cried if you could have showed me like a magic ball. This is, and I'd be like, really? Because I just felt it was so impossible. So yeah, I think, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm now forgetting the question because I got off track, but yeah, I never would have thought that I would have been able to do it. So my success. Yes. I think just being able to stick with it. But then even within that journey now, the beginning of COVID was really hard for me. So that was probably my one real close moment to a relapse. I was in a grocery store, everything had been like shut down. And I couldn't find, like, I was looking for like organic, chicken breasts or something, and all the organic meat, I was at like a Whole Foods. So like all the organic meat was gone. And I was like, oh my gosh, I had this moment of panic. I'm not going to be able to get the food that I need to eat. Of course, all the other crap was there. And there was this, like, I just picked up this chocolate bar. I was like, I remember just taking this inhale and just being like, nope, I don't do that anymore. I just don't. Thank God I had been saying that to myself, because it's just an automatic response now. And I was like, and I remember having this very clear moment of, I can really, really go off the rails here, or I can really tighten this up and come out of this even stronger. And that's what so I am so grateful for, again, whatever, because I was very aware of how, in any other situation, if it had been before my recovery, I would have loved, I've been like, yeah, an excuse to eat and drink and party. I would have had the COVID 50, forget the COVID 15, I would have, just gone off the rails completely. And so I just had that feeling of, oh my gosh, this could go really, really badly. And instead, I just doubled down. I made sure I was exercising, getting outside every day. I made sure my food was even tighter. That's when I signed up for Butcher Box, which, people don't know. It's a great way to order, organic grass-fed beef that gets delivered to you. And so I just made sure, when I could stock up, that I had the food that I needed. And of course I did, everything was totally fine, but I definitely had that moment of panic in the beginning. And it was the first time, I think, that I was really, really tempted to just kind of throw in the towel. So I do consider that like a huge success. And even coming out on the other side, just feeling like, I know I could be feeling really, really bad about myself now. I know I'm working with clients that, did kind of go off the rails, and, kind of dealing with the aftermath of that now. So I am really, really proud that I was able to, take that moment and just say, it's just not worth it, because it's just not worth it. I know that now too. That's the beauty of, because at that point I've had over 2 years of recovery. I just know it's just not worth it. And that's anytime, I might have one thought once in a while. Again, it's very, very rare now. But sometimes my kids ask me that. They're like, do you miss eating cookies? And I'm like, I really don't. Not at all. Like, I just feel so much better now. And it wasn't really ever, it was maybe a minute of pleasure, but then it was all the regret afterwards, the shame, the guilt, the constant, like, am I going to eat more? Am I, it's just those thoughts. I was just, basically stuck in a mental prison of my own thoughts. And I don't have that anymore. So yeah, I'm very, very glad and grateful that I was able to put the chocolate bar down and just be like, okay, just refocus. Like, you can do this. You got this.
Yeah, it's so funny how we can identify that we are food addicts. So, people are loading their carts with toilet paper. I'm like, forget about the toilet paper. Where's the meat? I gotta get meat. What happens if we run out of that? It's just so interesting how we think so differently, probably, than most people.
So true. I'd never worried about the toilet paper.
No, me
I didn't
neither.
get that at all. I was like, who cares?
You can use Kleenex.
Yeah. Yeah.
So on your podcast, we talked a little bit about the importance of always learning and growing in our recovery. And, you kind of shared one thing you struggled with, but what is in terms of running into a situation where you almost went back to the food, but what is maybe something emotionally or something you're still working on and developing, and what's kind of the priority you're focusing on right now in your life?
Yeah. I mean, it's like life, right? Like life, you just don't know what's coming. This is something I want to say is recovery is amazing. I feel so much better than I ever did, but life still happens. It doesn't mean your life is perfect all of a sudden on the other end, right? I think so many people have those thoughts. If I were just skinny enough, everything would be fine. If I just, get married, then everything's going to be perfect. But we all know it's not true. Life is life. And I've gone through, this past year has been a very hard one for me personally. And so, yeah, it's been a lot of struggles. And I think just realizing and accepting I am still very grateful though for my recovery, because I do think, oh my God, this would be so much harder if I didn't. I'm still so much more steadier than I would have been. But I think I am constantly working on my own emotional dealing with emotions, because again, hasn't been that long that I haven't been eating the emotions. I was never taught on how to deal with them. So that's where the emotion code to me is such a gift. And why I wanted to get certified, because I just saw all that it did for me, but then also able to help other people with it. And it's like, I'm sure you get like this too, working with clients. I learned so much from my clients, every day I'm just so motivated, and like, I don't know, I'm amazed by the people I work with, like, and sometimes it's even, I work with emotion code clients that aren't, addicts at all. They're just, we all have emotional baggage. I mean, addict or not. And even sometimes like I work with someone, I'm like, wow, that was like a message that I really needed to hear for myself. So I think by doing the emotion code, body code stuff, there's little messages that are constantly helping me in my own like emotional intelligence, I guess I would say, and just continuing to evolve and, being that more self-compassionate. I mean, like, that's just something that I work on every single day, and not having to be perfect, especially as a mom to 2 young kids. It's so hard in so many ways, so frustrating, and so just continually trying to, give myself, like, hey, you're doing pretty good, like give yourself a little break, a little bit credit. But also I like challenging myself to getting better, and continuing to try to, and I love trying new things out. That's why I love talking to people, and on the podcast is sometimes people will say, oh, I'm doing this. And I'm like, I'm going to write that down and give that a try. So being really open to, new things. But I think the biggest thing for me is working on my own emotional triggers, right? And because again, it's hard. Those are long ingrained in habits. And it's really something that I am very aware of that I'm going to be working on for the rest of my life. And I'm okay with that too. I'm totally okay with that. So yeah, I would say the emotional stuff is probably what I'm most focused on now, and teaching my kids a better way. I feel like, man, if we had learned this as kids, and that's why, again, I think the emotion code is so powerful, because I do it with the kids, and it's 60 different emotions that we're talking about. So if they don't know what something means, we talk, well, this is how that, you might have felt discouraged, or is one, and then they're like, oh yeah, that happened at school. Or, so I just think it's a really good way to kind of start that conversation now, because I really hope to give them the tools that they don't ever, have to go to shoving them down or being uncomfortable feeling things. And I think maybe that's the other thing, is feeling the uncomfortable feelings. Like anger, I think, is a really big one that I've been talking about more recently. I think that's one that a lot of us feel, and especially right now in the world and everything going on, I feel like I have a lot of anger, and it's a really uncomfortable one for me to feel personally, but also to share with other people. So I think it's a really hard one for even other people to hold space for anger, because we're kind of like, ooh, but really at the bottom of anger, it's a great catalyst too. It really, sometimes like getting angry is what makes big change in the world. So it's really, really important too. So I think that's, trying to not be so afraid of some of these big emotions, because realizing at the other end, there's some goodness that can come out of them too.
Yeah, super duper important stuff. And I think so many of us can identify with that same struggle, that emotional piece, and having to adjust to this idea that it is that lifelong journey, and we're not going to be fixed overnight, and we're not going to be fixed, even though, I mean, I've been in therapy since I was like 22 years old, right? And I'm not, quote unquote fixed. Like, that's just not a thing that's going to happen. It's this ever evolving process. So I think it's really important people hear that message. Again, thank you so much. So knowing that you walk in this world in a personal and professional role, what are your hopes for the future of food addiction treatment and recovery for yourself personally, but also then for the clients that you work with?
Well, 100% getting it medically recognized, and I know you both are working really hard on that, which I really, really appreciate, because I think that is really the most important thing right now, so that people that need the help and aren't getting the help can get the help, basically. Because I just think about me. I tried so hard to help myself. I thought I had binge eating disorder. I thought I had all these things, and I spent so much money and did so many things that never really helped me before, So if this is just another tool that, the medical professionals can add to and start being able to diagnose and recognize, there's just going to be more people that can get treatment faster and not have to go through the whole, 20 years that I had to go through, basically. Like, I just wonder if someone had gotten a hold of me really early on and said, hey, this sounds like, like Clarissa, your story of Dr. Vera Tarman being like, hey, this sounds like food, just be like, that's what food addiction. And I've been like, huh? So that to me is like the most important thing for myself, for other people, is getting that medically recognized, that people can get the help that they deserve, and also have it covered, to make it more affordable, so more people can get the help that they need, and just make it more like, so it's not like a taboo. It's just another, I have a hard time with sugar, and it just being that more and more people, because you don't find it weird when someone's like, I'm an alcoholic. It's like, oh, okay. And then I'm not going to be offering them wine, but it's like, I tell people I'm addicted to sugar and they're like, have some cake. It's like, no. So again, just kind of educating people and treating it as serious as it is, that it is like other addictions, and that, I can't just have a little bit. I don't know how many times people ask me that. So I think just if having it medically recognized, and educating people more about it. So, even your family and friends can be more supportive as they understand the seriousness of it more. And then also for people just, again, to get the help and treatment that they need, that's really targeted to that addiction piece, that's just not as available to everyone right now, or just too expensive, to get the help. So
yeah, it's why we're trying to do the summit for free and make it available to as many people who can hear it as possible. And I'm sure there's probably people who are going to be watching this and maybe they're just starting their journey. So what do you think you needed to hear when you were first starting this journey, and what can you share with them?
Yeah, I think what I needed to hear is, you're not alone. You are not the only person that suffers from this. You're not the only person that tells yourself, I'm going to start tomorrow, and you throw the cookies out in the trash can, but then you're eating them out of the dumpster diving the next day to get them out of the trash because you had a hard day, and you'll start tomorrow. Just all these things. You're not alone. I think, again, I felt like I was the only person in the world that suffered from this. And I am so grateful to be a part of this community now. And I feel like, especially right now, it's a great time to be starting your recovery, because there's so much support out there now. I think even more than there was, in 2018. It's just amazing to me. There's more, there's more podcasts. There's this summit, which is amazing. It's free, all this information, and just that community of knowing you are not alone. And again, and it's not your fault. It's not that you don't have enough willpower. There's not something wrong with you. It's not that you're not strong enough. You're not good enough. You're not enough. It's just, this is like, this is a disease. This is, how our brains work. And there is freedom. It's not something that you have to struggle with your whole life either. I think that's the other message. It's just remain hopeful. You can get better. It does get better. And there is freedom, on the other side of it. And you don't have to do it alone. There's lots of support out there.
It's a beautiful message. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Siobhan. I was just thinking, oh my goodness, she must be getting tired of us. We've had you on the podcast. You've had us on your podcast. You're on the summit. But we just appreciate every time that you're willing to show up for us and give us your time and speak to a shared audience, I'm sure, and just help spread the word. And that's what we're all here for. So thank you again so much.
And thank you so much for having me and for putting on this summit. I just think it's amazing for people. So thank you for all the work that you both do.
And we'll make sure to link all of the ways that people can get in touch with you in this
Great.
episode as well.
Yes, I love hearing from people. So great.